This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. I just got back from a trip to Oslo where I was speaking at the first ever Oslo Street Photography Festival. And congrats to everybody involved, they put a great event together and I had a really good time. But I realized that the talk I was giving was about street photography, and there was a section in this talk where I give some very practical advice to street photographers about the mentality we should have when we're out there and the things that we can do to stay comfortable, to stay in a good mental space while we're shooting, and to unlock things when we feel like we're getting a bit stuck. But then I realized I haven't actually shared a lot of these tips with you here on this channel. So I thought I'd come back, make this video to correct that. So the first one is super practical: travel light and wear good shoes. When I'm out taking street photographs, I'm doing minimum 20 to 30,000 steps in a day. And sometimes I'm up to 40, 50, and I think my record is 60,000 in one day. That's a lot of distance that you cover. And I find that the more I walk around, the more I'm going to see. So being comfortable while I do that is really important. And it's not just important because I like to be comfortable, we all do. It's important because I don't want to give myself any excuses to have to stop shooting and go back home. I mean, if I'm walking around and I'm sort of getting some images, but not really, I know I have to push. If I also have sore feet or my bag is getting heavy on my back, it's just another reason to tell myself, oh, don't worry, come back another day, this is getting a bit tough. When it comes to shoes, I had an experience a few years ago where I had a pair that I thought were really comfortable. I won't name the brand so that I don't embarrass them, but I realized over time that I was starting to get a bit of cramp in my foot. It felt like underneath the arch of my foot was really starting to seize up. And as I kept walking over the next few weeks, I got to a stage where I almost couldn't walk. I was limping everywhere. And I went downstairs and I took my shoes and I looked inside and I realized that the insole underneath the ball of my right foot had completely eaten away and I hadn't noticed. So there was no support under there and it was causing all these other muscles around it to work harder. And for those 2 weeks, I hardly shot. It's a really simple and practical thing, but if you want to walk far taking images, make sure you have good shoes, or you're not going to want to go because it's going to be too uncomfortable. Personally, I purchase Hokas. I really like that they've got a very flat profile between heel and toe and a lot of support, but they're very lightweight too, and they work for me. And then when it comes to bags and cameras, when I started out, I used to walk around with a backpack with 2 5D Mark IIs and 4 lenses because I was anxious that I might leave the prime that I needed at home and I'd regret it. And 2 DSLRs and those heavy glass lenses just ended up being a very heavy backpack, which wears you down over a day. These days when I go out, I'll take a lightweight backpack, I'll have my Sony in it, maybe a couple of primes, but they're the lightweight 1.8 primes so they don't weigh a lot. Or I'll just put my Ricoh GR in my pocket and go walking around because there's no weight to that at all. And that way, with good shoes on my feet and a lightweight on my back, I can walk all day, which will give me way more chance to get better images. The next one is if you're feeling stuck in a rut with your street photography, try a different focal length. The focal length we choose gives us our way of seeing the world, of capturing it, of sharing it with other people around us. But over time, we can start to become quite used to one focal length. We can start to master it. We know what it does and we know how to use it. But at that point, things can often become quite samey and we don't feel like we're growing or learning anymore. At that point, it might be a good idea to pick a focal length that's a little bit away from what you're used to, just to see what it has to teach you. I mean, my sweet spot focal length is probably 50mm, out and about. It's the way that I like to see the world. But for a good 2 years, I shot with the Ricoh GR3, which is a 28mm equivalent, which is much wider than I'm used to. But I have to say that disciplining myself to shoot with that focal length for a while, even though it wasn't my favorite, taught me so much about composition, how to take lots of different elements in a scene and arrange them within a frame when I couldn't compress it down to simplify it. And I'm now glad that I pushed myself to shoot with a focal length that's outside my comfort zone to break me loose of the pattern that I was in with the 50mm. So here's the challenge. If you really want to try this, I would say go out for a whole day, maybe 2 days, maybe a week, with just your normal camera body and a lens on it that's not your lens of choice. And don't take your favorite lens with you, because what will happen is you'll get frustrated after half an hour that you're not getting any good shots with, say, that 28mm, if that's the uncomfortable one for you. And you'll take it off and quickly put on the normal one so you can get back to making images quickly. And you won't push through to learn those lessons. Try a different focal length for a while. Don't bring your favorite and see what it has to teach you. The next one is when you're walking around and shooting, stop worrying about your hit rate. For those of you who don't know, hit rate describes the number of photographs a photographer takes in a day, the number of times they physically click the shutter, versus the number of images in that batch that they consider are good enough to be keepers or to share with the rest of the world. And they think about it like a ratio. So if I go out in a day and I take 80 images, if I get 20 of those that are keepers, which never happens by the way, that'd be 1 in 4. That's my hit rate. But personally, I don't know why photographers obsess about this so much. I mean, does it really matter how many shots it takes you to get to the good ones? If I look at the greats, it seems to have taken them thousands and thousands of images to get to the really good stuff. Cartier-Bresson said that your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. You have to get them out of your system. So the quicker we stop thinking about, well, I need to take less images and more of those have to be good images to prove my talent score as a photographer, the quicker we move that stuff out of our head, the more we'll give ourselves permission to play and experiment, which I really believe is the way to be a better photographer. I have to tell myself this stuff regularly because I can be a little bit controlling with my images and too careful. I'll walk around a corner and think, well, that's not good enough. I'm better than that. I won't take it, almost as if I'm better than the scene. But I've learned that if anything about the scene or the shot resonates with me, even if it's a cliched shot or just something cheesy, I always now give myself permission to at least make that image. I might never share it, but to go back later and to look at those images and ask myself, why did I respond to that? What is there in that? There might be a lesson to learn. And that image might not be a keeper or a final that I share with the rest of the world, but it gives me something that I feed back into my knowledge about how I make images more generally. It's the advice I give every new photographer who comes to me and asks, how can I get better as a photographer? Just take a load of images. Give yourself permission to shoot anything and everything that you even sort of respond to and see what it has to teach you. And every time you click that shutter, you will learn a little lesson. The next is to walk more and visually exercise even when you don't have a camera on you. Street photography is a way of seeing the world, and we don't need a camera in our hand to be able to practice that. I would say get off the bus, get off the tube more often and walk through your city whenever you can manage it, whenever you have the time. And even if you don't have your camera with you, while you're walking, think about the shots you would take of those scenes that you come across. Imagine how you compose them. Notice interesting bits of light and log that stuff away. Personally, I love doing that because it makes me more present to the world around me. Beyond the photography, it helps me be in the space that I'm actually in, to visually appreciate the things around me and to be visually exercising so that I have more ideas on those days when I pick up a camera in earnest. My friend Joshua K. Jackson does this great street photography exercise that I love, just to warm people up who come to his workshops, where he pairs them up and he gets them to walk down the street without a camera on them yet. They leave them in the bag and they just have to point out to each other the things that they're noticing in pairs. Oh, I like that. That's interesting. That character's interesting. That light interesting. That color combination is interesting. And that way of visually exercising warms you up to a way of seeing that stands you in good stead when you actually start to make images. So maybe you want to do that with a creative friend or fellow photographer and walk around and play the say what you see game to visually exercise with each other and notice what each other notices. That can be very interesting too. Or you just want to make sure that you're walking more through your city, even when you're not deliberately shooting, that you're visually exercising to teach yourself how to notice more. The next one is get lost. This is an approach I take whenever I go to visit a new city. I don't go online and look at the images of that city and try work out what the interesting things are. I don't Google the spots to go to make images, and I try not to ask for lots of recommendations because I know what will happen is I'll go, I'll see the city through the eyes of other people, what they think are the important things to see, and I'll end up making images that look like everybody else's. So instead, what I do is I try and find a place that's pretty central in that city, and I just walk. And I walk far, and I walk fast, and I deliberately get lost. I've always got my GPS that will get me back to the hotel. I won't really be lost. But if I just follow my intuition, walk down alleyways or roads where I feel like there might be something interesting there, I use a more intuitive sense to try and find the images along the way. And I find that that helps me get more interesting images. The best compliments I've gotten as a street photographer are where I have visited a city that's completely new to me. I've made images, I've shared them online, and then people who actually live in that city have got hold of me and said, hey, it's been great to see your take on this city. I hadn't noticed that part of it. And that only comes from following my intuition rather than Googling the photography spots or asking other photographers what they normally shoot. So trust yourself, trust your gut, and get lost. The next one is while you're out shooting, put the potential responses to your work out of your mind completely. I shared a video recently where I talked about the fact that most of the responses you're going to get to your images when you share them online are from beginner photographers. And what a mistake it is if we start letting our work and our growth be directed by the opinions of beginner photographers on the internet. We have to be a bit more self-contained in that and believe that we know what the path forward is for ourselves. And we have to trust ourselves that if we think something is a good image, that we will take it, we will share it with the world because we know that's growth for us, even if the internet disagrees. I'll give you a very recent example. I was down in London a few weeks ago and I took these two images. Now the image on the left got 6 times the number of views, 8 times the number of likes, and 5 times the number of comments as the image on the right. Instagram loved the one on the left. But if you were standing in Trafalgar Square, you would realize what a simple image this is to take. It's almost a cliche. I mean, that hoarding is there with the hand coming out of it. It's obvious just to wait for somebody to walk past. It looked like the hand's grabbing them. It's an easy juxtaposition trick and it's like a one-line joke. It's not a very complicated image. I've seen lots of other people take similar things since. But the image on the right is one I really care about. It's an image I was taking on the tube, on the way home, back to the hotel, and I saw this mother and son. They'd obviously had a long day. The way that they're collapsed into each other, the hands of the son over the mother. I mean, this is an image that's taken on a phone. It's grainy, it's soft, it's not very good. But somehow to me, it feels like a Renaissance painting. And I think it's a far stronger image than the one I took with my proper camera in Trafalgar Square that got so much attention. I know the one on the right has a lot more to teach me and represents forward and growth for me. I know it's tough. I know we want people to tell us that our images are good because that's how we judge whether we're doing well or not. But I really think we have to back ourselves, like I had to do with that image. I know which direction I'm going. I know what growth looks like for me, and I cannot take the opinions of groups of beginners who comment on my work online seriously because it might derail me and take me down the wrong road. Of course those commenters mean well, and they genuinely like the image. I do too. But I have to back myself and know what good actually means. So when you're out there making images, if you're taking shots and thinking, well, no one's going to like this, if you like it, that's probably enough for you to make it and enjoy the process. And the last one is cultivate curiosity. The best photographers I know are naturally curious people. They want to know about life. They notice lots of things that the rest of us miss. And on those days where I feel stuck, like I don't have a lot of inspiration, it's often not the camera that gets me out of that funk. Sometimes it's picking up a book and reading about a subject I find fascinating, or going researching more about how my city works and what goes on there, or the history of that city, or just reading things in general about the mind and our psychology as human beings and how we think. Maybe you woke up on a particular day wanting to go out and take images, but the weather's horrific, or you're feeling a bit sick so you can't really go out and you need to stay home and recover. That's not a wasted day. You don't have to be out making images with your camera. You can be at home and working on your mind, building your curiosity, learning more things, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, reading books that fire up your imagination so that the next time you go out with your camera, you're full of more ideas about things you find interesting in the world. And I promise you, that will feed back and build depth into the work that you're making. So this has probably been an unusually practical video from me, but I really hope you found it helpful. That gives you some ideas for how you can be a healthier, more connected street photographer, someone who makes more work and has that longevity, that you're not going to burn out, that you're going to be kind to yourself and constantly be filled with new ideas. And as you go out and make images, remember, this is the thing you love. We sometimes have to remind ourselves that because we hit tough days, but we do it because we love it, even on those tough days. And growth comes over time, so be kind to yourself. Don't bully yourself into progress that isn't quite there yet. Just know that one step in front of another, every time you click the shutter, you're going to learn something new and your work is going to get better. And lastly, thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself for over a decade now as my website of choice. The biggest reason I found and continue to use Squarespace is because I need a website but have no idea how to put one together. But I want to do it myself. I want to have that control over it, to be able to build it and make changes on the fly. Squarespace make it super easy for me to build my own, even with no knowledge, to just be in the back end and drag in text blocks and image blocks and galleries and videos and contact pages. And while I'm doing it, I can see what I'm going to get, what the website's actually going to look like. All the templates are designed by professional designers, so the look on the front end is always very clean and minimal, which I really like because it's then my work that does the talking. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.